SmashFactor.
Ripping driver, going for it. Oh my goodness, how about that tee shot?
That is crazy how far that is.
Wow. John Daly, take a back seat, big fella. How about that drive?
That's an aggressive line. That is beyond long.
Look at this, he's just driven the green. He has just driven the green.
I guess hello world, huh?
Corner OGs, what's going on? Welcome to episode 77 of the SmashFactor. This is the FedEx St. Jude Invitational, and we have a special guest today, Toe Tag and Tambo. What's going on, my man?
What's up, man? I'm back. I'm getting all these pod appearances, and I'm feeling more special as the weeks go on. It's incredible.
You should feel special. This is the first time, I think, well, at least in a long time, maybe all year, that Gup hasn't been on. And so I'm super excited to have you kind of co-host here. So I'm pumped. But let's get into real quick. I want to just recap the British Open. How'd you do last week?
I just hate my life. Oh man, it's so sad. Like, really, it is. I thought I was getting the ultimate Mayo bump, and I even posted on Twitter after I got off the mishap, the Mayo mishap, we'll call it, of the year. And I said, you know what? All these people talking shit, I'm going to dunk on all of them. I said, I'm going to win the Millie. I'm going to get back on the show, and I'm going to crush everybody. And honestly, I was with like 3 holes to go. For most of my lineup, I'd say maybe 5 holes to go for the tournament. I was sitting in like 8th place, and then Ricky doubles for the second time on the day, the JT triple on 17, which was disgusting, Reed bogey, Finau bogey, and then all of a sudden Stenson, who's like approach master of the world, decides to shank a ball worse than I even do, and I suck at golf, and then snaps his club and finishes out bogey, and I still managed to finish 16th, which is something I'm still pretty proud of, because the year, I got 14th at the Masters. I got 105th in the stacked field, the $100 one, and then 16th here out of 178,000. It's right there. Something big is coming. So on the week, I needed a top 12 to make up my buy-ins on the week, and I got 16th. So that pissed me off too. But overall, it was fun. Amazing event from a fan standpoint, and a way to end the year. I really know the schedule is a big talk for a lot of people, but for me, comes down to it's hard for them to make it perfect. It's like anything else in life. You can't make everybody happy. There's definitely some things that they need to work on. We'll probably talk about them, but for, it to end with the Open, for it to end, start with the year with the Tiger crowd following him up, and him winning the Masters and the crowd being there with him and surrounding him. It was like when Shane Lowry just won it with the whole Irish fan base behind him. It was pretty much like Tiger at the Tour Championship last year when he got his first, real win, so to speak, and everyone was following up the 18th hole to get there and see him get it done. Just incredible, man. How did you do, and what did you think?
I got crushed. This was my worst week of the year, but that's what happened. I only had 4 lineups on the week, typical for me. But when you have a core of starting with Rory, it's not going to be good. I have not been, outside of Tiger on Sunday at the Masters, I have not been more invested emotionally in a guy's round than Rory on Friday. He played so freaking good and was so close to making the cut. If he makes the cut, I think he top 15s.
Oh, definitely.
And especially with the way Sunday was. But his play was phenomenal. And you could tell with every single shot on that back 9 Friday how much it all meant to him. And so overall, the event from a DFS perspective sucked. But this was, outside of the Masters, this was the most enjoyable event for me from a viewing perspective all year, for a couple different reasons. One, because I got to watch the majority of it. But 2, I thought the coverage was good. I thought that, yes, there's some things that they can improve upon, but I wake up at 7 a.m. Eastern and I can watch for 5 straight hours. It was awesome. And so I loved it. There are a couple of things I want to ask you about. The first one being, and I know it's something that we've chatted about it briefly, a lot of people on Twitter have chatted about, but JB Holmes. obviously notorious for being a slow player, but you have him playing with Brooks, who has been super vocal over the last year about slow play, and JB in particular. And then they get paired with each other on Sunday, and obviously JB goes out and shoots 87 or something, and he's 15 over for the day and taking 2 minutes on a putt. What are your thoughts on that whole situation in Brooks and JB?
Yeah, I mean, we all hate slow play. It's just annoying. It's bad for the game. It sucks in real life. It definitely sucks on tour. It sucks when you're waiting on your scores to update for DK. Pretty much any aspect, it's not fun.
Yeah.
I think Brooks said it pretty good after the event. You know, he was quoted as saying it's not just JB, basically. He said, you know, the problem with JB, he said, is the dude stands around, doesn't line anything up, doesn't even put his glove on. And then when it's his turn, he puts his glove on and goes and figures it out. You know, that to me is just disrespectful. You can go and figure it out. It's not that hard. And I get that there's a lot of money on the line. There's a lot of, you know, clout or product on the line. If you want to talk about trophies and history and all the factors that go into it. But, you know, he's got to do something before the play. I don't think, you know, I definitely believe in some karma and that, but I don't think that had anything to do with him shooting an 87. I think he's just not that good, and it caught up to him. You know, he's a good player at times. Definitely, he's a volatile player. It can work. You know, from our perspective on betting and GPPs, you know, he's one of those ones that you're nervous about throwing him in, and that's why he wasn't in a lot of lineups. But quite the fall to see an 87. I think it was like a 67, 69, 70, and then he shoots an 87. Like, that's a incredible swing, just ridiculous overall. But for me, it is what it is. There's going to be slow players. I like Brooks' mentality of it. We got to do something to speed it up. Yeah. But I don't know what they're going to do. If they're not going to penalize him or put him on the clock, then what's the play?
I think that's I'm glad you mentioned it, because that's definitely what it is. It's not that he's generally he's overly slow. I guess we can't debate that because it's truth. But you're right. It all comes down to how long he takes once he gets started, and he doesn't start until it's his turn to play, which is ridiculous. So when I was teaching junior golf, ladies clinics, men's golf clinics, one of the things that we always talked about at the country club that I used to work at, because we had a strict slow play policy. If you weren't playing in under 4 hours, we were asking you to leave the golf course if you were holding somebody up. And we enforced it, and the membership wanted us to enforce it. And so every time we had a clinic or junior clinic, ladies clinic, part of what we talked about is, listen, whether you go out and shoot 65 or 105, you can still play quick. Obviously, you're taking more strokes, but when you're sitting there waiting to hit and somebody else is waiting while somebody else is playing and you're waiting for them, you can do things like figure out your yardage, your club, put on your glove, take your practice swings, get ready. And that's stuff that JB, I think it's like a mental routine for him. He has to get in his routine, and he can't stop, or he's going to have to start over again.
One more interesting point on that is with all Brooks' success, it's not just that he's against slow play, it's that he's for faster play. And that's again, and talk about routine wise. I mean, he says that he plays better when he doesn't sit there and take 10 practice shots and just takes the practice swing, maybe if at all, and then goes and hits the ball, because he takes that aspect out of it. Whereas guys like Ricky, you know, even Cantlay, some of those guys, yes, they can have success with it, but they definitely over exaggerate their practice. And, you know, 60 seconds to warm up for a drive, you're teeing off on one, you know, one, you've seen one, you practiced one. And
on one, he hooks it OB, and he starts walking off the tee like it's somehow in bounds. And I was like, what is this dude doing? But
it's nuts, man.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. Let's talk the winner, though, real quick. Before we I get your thoughts on Shayna's performance for the ages. There was an interesting stat that Kenny put out earlier, and I'm not sure if he got it from somebody else. Credit to that person if he did, but Kenny's kind of that deep, dark fact, Crown Royal fact finder. Yeah, that's his gig. But can you tell our viewers right now what that fact is? I just thought it was insane.
Well, this was actually Kenny is the Kenny After Dark, and I'm recording this right before I go on with him, so I'm excited to sort of do a double take tonight. But it's actually, if you don't follow him, it's a pretty good follow. It's at BC606, and he goes by Nosferatu.
Oh yeah, he's good.
He calls himself the OWGR guru. So he basically he figures out the stats beforehand and what would this equal to if this happened, and it's some cool stats. he actually put this out before the Open started. I was on Lowry because of our boy OG, which is incredible. And I know he had a massive week. So shout out to OG there. I think he had Lowry at 100-1 and 66-1, double down. Won't say why, but I love that. But the stat that BC 606 put out was incredible. He said the average ranking of the Open winners since the inception of OWGR was number 33. Shane Lowry happened to be ranked number 33 in the world going into the event. The average age of the Open winners since Apollo 11 landed on the moon, quote unquote, a Canadian chiming in here, is 32.4, and Lowry's age going in rounded to 32.4. So he basically says just the stat of the day and called the winner, and it ended up happening based off that cool stat. So speaking of OG, I think he said he's going to fact check it, but I do believe this guy to be a pretty good source, and pretty crazy 5 days ago that he let it out. And then yesterday, Lowry does his thing and wins the event, which was incredible.
That's awesome. Yeah, and when I saw that stat, I was kind of mind-blown. Obviously, it's just dumb luck, but it's pretty incredible when that kind of stuff happens. But I thought Lowry's play, there was a point in time on the back nine where I was like, okay, it could get interesting here. And then he just shut the door. He played phenomenal golf, kept it in play, hit a ton of greens, made the most of his opportunities. So congrats to him. It was a fantastic week. It really is disappointing and sucks that we have 9 more months until another major. But we got football season coming up. We got fall swing. We got the FedEx Cup. We got all sorts of good stuff coming up. So before we get into the FedEx, I'm going to give a shout out real quick to our Listener League winner, Birdman Suckas. Just crushed it this week. He had a lineup of Brooks, X, Lowry, Reed, Glover, and Furyk. All 6 made the cut. Furyk was a little disappointing, but Brooks, X, Lowry, Reed right there, that was insane. So kudos to him. Great work. He's had a couple good weeks this year. So as far as show sponsors and affiliates, download the Thrive Fantasy app. Use the promo code GUP. You'll receive $10 free with your first deposit of $20. Deposit bonus is for a limited time, so get that free money while you can. Fanshare Sports, 20% off with the code GUP. Again, get the pro advantage. And then fantasynational.com. Use the tools we use. fantasynational.com/GUP. Click on the link on gupscorner.com affiliates page. 20% off your subscription. That's what we use. That's what pretty much everybody else uses. Great information over there. Great guys. And then last but not least, rate and review on iTunes, Instagram, Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit that like button, please. It'll benefit you. It benefited you last week for the Open Championship. We got a lot of other stuff coming up, so please check us out on iTunes, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Now, TPC Southwind. I will go ahead and kick us off with a quick course preview, and then I'm going to kick it over to you with what kind of stats you are looking at this week. We are, like I said, at TPC Southwind for the FedEx St. Jude. They are playing it at 7,237 yards, par 70. They have zoysia grass fairways, Bermuda greens, and rough. Greens are pretty much average size, 5,400 square feet. A little smaller than tour average, but fairly close. 11.5 to 12 on the stimp meter as far as green speeds, and the average winning score is like 13 under. Overall, the golf course can be gettable. We saw it last year with DJ, but it also can bite you in the ass. This golf course ranks number 1 on tour with the most amount of water balls. Number 2 is TPC Sawgrass, and it's not even close. Southwind had 1,400 more balls in the water than TPC Sawgrass. So tons and tons of trouble lurking. If you want a more in-depth preview, check out the breakdown on gupscorner.com. I released that this morning. As far as the weather goes, it looks freaking amazing. From Tuesday through Sunday, there is almost no chance of rain, super light winds, mid-80s and sunny. So it should be a perfect event for scoring. This is the event last year where everybody decided to hop on Braden Thornberry. This is where he came out and kind of had his initial debut and then faded off into the wind with Panda somewhere. But do you have anything to add to the course preview, the weather? If you don't, why don't you kick it into stats and let me know what you're thinking this week?
Yeah, tie it together a little bit. I think the one thing I'm going to be watching out for, it looked like there was a little bit of rain like today or something or tomorrow leading in, which could, yes. I just think if that dries out a little bit and we get a little bit more fast and firm headed into the week, it's still, like you said, I don't think there's going to be any wave advantages or anything like that based on what we're seeing right now in the weather. But something as small as, for me, one stat I'm looking at this week, in the past, 175 to 200 has been a popular range.
Yes,
I'm gonna weigh in 150 to 175 a little bit here, because if it is rolling out a bit more, we're actually gonna drier conditions. You see that range pop a little bit more. Some interesting notes, and I'm using my phone here just because that's what I do, and I'm not always on video for podcasts. But I saw today, we had Kenny and I had Ben Coley on the pod last week. One of the stats he put out today was 7 of the last 8 Southwind winners led the field in strokes gained tee to green for the week.
Oh, yeah,
so
for sure.
tee to green, an obvious one, but I'm just saying, just in case, I'll put that out there. Strokes gained approach, definitely going to be important here. Greens, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but are hit at a much less than standard rate. Therefore, I'm going to bring some scrambling into it as well. And then, of course, with it being a no-cut event, birdies are better and DK points.
Yeah.
And I always put a little bit of putting in, just a tiny bit, just to sort of be a tiebreaker for me. What about you? Anything different?
Yes, pretty similar. I agree that if the course is playing firmer, you're obviously going to see some lesser yardages. Fairways here are fairly hard to come by. They're a much smaller percentage of fairways being hit. Same with greens, and that makes sense. But with that being said, you also have a ton of par fours that are over 450 yards. And so that 150 to 200 range will be super, super popular this week. When you look at the last few years, there's a few stats that really stand out. Tee to green obviously is one of them, and a big component of that. And the leading stat from the contenders, top 10 finishers, top 20 finishers over the last few years is strokes gained approach. You have, like I said, a ton of water that comes into play. And the guys that are leading in iron play and greens in regulation are the guys that typically contend. And so, like I said, winning scores like 13 under, so you can get it and go low here for sure, but trouble is lurking. You're going to find it at some point in time. You're just trying to minimize your mistakes here, but I do like your thought process on if the course is a bit drier, playing firm and fast, you're going to have a little less yardage, and I think that's accurate. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Before we dive into like the players and the player pools that we're looking at, I do want to touch on, and we touch on it every week, but I want to take a little different approach this week, is contest selection. So I'm glad we have you on this week because Gup and I typically are the 3 to 6 lineup guys. We have a really super tight core. You're the GPP guy. You're the mass entry guy. So for me, I'm likely going to have my 3 lineups, do the 3 max events, do the bigger dollar tournaments like I always do. But for you, what is your strategy as a MME player going into a no-cut event like this?
Yeah, so good question. For me, and we're definitely different. Like I said, you and Gup typically play that. That's sort of my worst skill set. If you want to look at the GC Cup Woods, you'll see where I'm almost dead last, I think. It's just not my thing, right? I do it to play along with everyone. I certainly work on it every week. I believe in sort of practicing, honing your craft. It's something I want to get better at and build it that way. But my skill set lies in leveraging a field, right? So I need more lineups. I need to be able to do stuff. So, even last night, somebody asked me on a DM about, 20 max, for example. And they said, I did some of these sets of lineups and some of these sets of lineups. And then with my last 10, I did this. It's a little bit tricky. Everyone's going to have their own opinion. For me, one thing I said on that is I said basically on me on a 20 max, or it's sort of all or nothing. Similar to what you did last week with Rory. I know it's not always going to be that way, but it's not really going to benefit you to go 1 Rory, 1 DJ, 1 Brooks in a 3 max. I get for risk versus reward, and that's why it's tough to answer these questions. And there is no true answer.
Not unless your core happens to be all guys between 75 and 8,500, and then you swap out the top guys. But typically, you're taking the top guys in your core.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's sort of the same point that happens with me and Brooks. And in the Slack, we get in a conversation all the time. Well, how come you said this about Brooks last time, but now here you're saying this? It's because every tournament's different, right? No cut adds another element to it. Smaller field adds a blowout. Like last week, I was trying to explain Rory. I thought Rory and Brooks were the only two, in my opinion, in that field that could blow the field out and win by 5. Happened to be Shane Lowry in the end, but in the end, in the beginning, my thought was it's only those two. The reason I'm not on Brooks is because I'm not going to continue chasing something with him versus with Rory. I had all these factors: course history, open history, local narrative, so many factors that went into it, and stats leading up, the year he's been having, et cetera, et cetera. So back to this conversation, I just said to the person, if you got 20 max, for me, I'm going to be an all or nothing, meaning if everyone's on AM, PM, I might go all PM, AM. If everyone's going to do heat maps, don't do 3 heat map lineups and 3 of Gup's favorite picks lineups and rankings lineups and 3 of what Buck said on the podcast lineups.
Yeah.
Pick one and go, because you're going to have to beat everybody and you're going to need combinations to get there. Because I always have like a minimum of 75 and above, I am able to do some of that. I might do 10 a.m. PM, 15 p.m. a.m. the opposite, and see that I have an edge there, and then mix up my pool the rest of the way. But that's why I'm saying do it with more lineups. So I'm still playing more lineups this week. One strategy I'll bring up here that I don't normally do, and everyone knows me to not do this. I never just fade anyone because of ownership, and I'm still not really doing that. But I will say this: when it comes to Wednesday in an event like this, I may just fade everyone that I see that looks like they're going to be over 20%. And again, like I always say, don't just do it because they're 20%. Like, Ricky at the WMPO, I always bring it up, 42% in high stakes, and you needed him. But what I'm saying here is, and my reason behind it, is that you already have to differentiate. It's already a smaller field.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they're like, I think it's 46 out of the top 50 in the world in a 64-man field. So what you're telling me is, which is nuts. So my realistic reason behind it is, and how I can back it up, and I'm not just fading the chalk, it's because they're all good players. A guy at 8,900, like Hideki's 8,900 and Bryson's 88, we'll get into that. But my point is, you can't tell me one of them is really that much better than the other.
Yeah. So
if one of them is going to be 20% and the other, I know this seems like standard, normal, every week stuff, but in a week like this, especially where it's a non-cut event, there's an opportunity that they all can do the same thing as long as one outscores the other. But you don't want more 6 out of 6 lineups here, because it's not a thing unless somebody withdraws. But you do want the lineups that have the upside to leverage off and not be the same chalk that everybody else is on, because a lot of split pots. And another thing is leaving money on the table, which we'll bring up later as well. So for me this week, similar strategy, but with some added mix into it. Yeah,
no, I'm in the same boat for a 20 max. And I've had that question before as well. For me in a 20 max, I typically would do like 15 lineups as my core. Like my core is going to be in 15 lineups. And then those 5, I'm going to get super weird and basically have a few hedge lineups where I legitimately think I'm taking into account ownership. I'm taking into account guys that I think can go off that don't happen to be in my core. If my core is 100% Rory, then I might go Brooks and I might go DJ just to try to hit the nuts with that one lineup. But I'm glad you mentioned that. I've had a couple DMs last week, and I think they're super valid, and I'm glad they brought them up. But I'm going to ask you this, and this is different for both of us because we play decently high stakes on a weekly basis. If you only had $100 to play with this week, what contests would you enter? How many lineups would you enter? How would you attack the week with only $100 as your bankroll?
Yeah, I think I think everyone's still going to be different because it's still risk versus reward. But for me, I'm going to do this. What I'm probably going to do, I still want to play I guess pick your strategy first off. So for me, it's multi-entry. So, yeah. But I only have $100 and I don't want to go all in on that strategy. So for me, I'm going to do something like there's a nice $3 20 max. And I think it's like, I want to say $100,000 or maybe it's $150,000 prize pool, but they're still only doing 10,000 the first. I say only, but that's less than 10% of the prize pool. So that's amazing. The payout structure is incredible. That would give you 20 lineups to still be different with. And that's again, it's an aggressive approach because it's 60% GPP. But what I would do with the remaining $40 is I would put it into the large field single entry double ups and still play $40 in cash. And the idea behind it would be that if I can double up that cash, I still come back with 80 of my $100. And then all I got to do is cash a few of those GPP lineups. to break even on the week, but obviously you'd have 20 bullets at the upside of taking down something huge and really turning your $100 roll into 10,000. I mean, it's still a little bit riskier approach, but I definitely think I'd love to have those 20 bullets to try my upside and then use the other 40 bucks in cash to make my best lineup and still duplicate it, because, we had this talk today with someone else I was talking to. When you build a cash lineup, you're typically building for high floor, high ceiling, which means if it goes off and actually does what it's supposed to do, it actually could end up that you have 6 guys in the top 10, including the winner, which would take down a GPP likely. So not something to say it just can't win because it's too chalky. If it's the best lineup, it's the best lineup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have a couple different thoughts on this. I'm glad you mentioned the 20 max, because that's definitely a direction that I would consider going. But for me, especially if let's just say your weekly bankroll is $100 and you want to have a sweat, having those 20 bullets in there gives you a better opportunity at having some sort of sweat. It's going to keep you more engaged with the event. For me personally, I would attack the 3 entry max events and roll 3 entries. I'd probably do the $20 3 entry. And so you got $60 in there. They got a $3 3 entry, which is decent payouts. And then I take that extra $30 I got and throw those 3 lineups in the $10 and hope one of them is the nuts, and you got a chance at $200K up top. Obviously, the 3 entry max events are kind of your best bet. First, throwing it in the $10 with fucking a million people. But I would attack it with the 3 entry or the 20 max. I wouldn't take the $100 and throw 10 bullets in the $10. I think that's largely a waste of money.
Yeah, you got to have, especially 2 things. One, I like what you just said. If you're more your style of player, for sure, Bucks, and guys are, I know that, the guys and girls in the chat that play, they're playing that style as well. You could do 3 in the PME, $15 3 match, no break, and then run $65 in cash, where if you just hit in cash, you actually make money on the week still. But if you crack the nuts in the PME, you end up cranking out a nice $5,000 score. Your 0.3 in the 20 uses up that same $60 I was using. I just want more bullets in the bigger, but mine is more boom or bust. And for someone who's better or thinks they're better or wants to get better at MME, yours makes more sense again because it is a smaller bankroll, and I get you're trying to build it up. It's just for me, like I said, it doesn't matter how many times I seem to try it. My success rate in 1 to 3 max is terrible versus I can top 20 a milli maker twice in a season. Like that's just where my skill set lies to be able to leverage fields versus, and you could say, why can't you do it in 1? It's all about pools and leveraging certain buy-ins and leveraging prices of guys like 8,800 versus 89. We'll talk about it in a bit and things like that. So different strategy altogether. And Gup talks about that all the time. And I think it's a really good point, right? It's different for every tournament. And even then it's different for every buy-in and for structure and all these different factors you have to bring into your whole process.
Especially a tournament like this, which is no cut. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I want to mention real quick, and I'm sure we'll mention it a couple times, but if you're not in the Slack, hop in the Slack. We'll be in there fielding questions about our thought processes, the contests that we're entering, our player selections. Make sure you're on the E9 this week. We're going to be talking a lot about the players, and especially once ownerships kind of come out. That's a big, big factor this week with it being a no-cut event and so top-heavy. So make sure you check those out. Without further ado, though, let's get into the Dirty Dozen. So we're going to have a few different tiers here, one at 9K or above, 76 to 89, 75 or less, and then kind of a 4th tier, which is a flop, a fade, and a sleeper. I'm going to kick it to you first. Give me, and they don't have to be super detailed, but give me your 3 picks 9K or above this week.
All right, so first one I'll go right off the top is Rory. Just going back to him, I get it was a very mentally draining week for him. I know it's going to be tough. I love the Friday atmosphere. I love the 65. Yes. I was invested in him, but I can honestly tell you guys, I'm pretty transparent. If I had $0 on him, I honestly would have been rooting for him to make that. Like it was just so much, emotion, so to speak, just to get this guy back. Like I felt bad for the guy. He's a good guy. He did nothing wrong. It just sort of had a bad first day. I wanted him to get it back, and it sucked that he didn't, but what a valiant effort. So main reason I'm back on him, couple stats. One, our friends at Fanshare Sports, I know you mentioned it earlier, use the promo code GUP, but they brought out this morning that the leaders in average DK points in WGC events since 15 and 16 at TPC Southwind is Rory McIlroy at 28.61. So he's the leader there. I do like that. The other thing was Justin Ray brought out, what was it now? It was, after a miscut, his last 4 miscuts, Rory's follow-up finishes are a win, a second place, a win, and a 12th place. So he's obviously good on a bounce back. And then what I talked about earlier, tee to green, he's number 1, at least in the last 3 months. He's number 1 in stats across the board. I'm not going to take that one round with everything on the line, all the emotion, everything in it away from him to say that he's no good anymore. At 11-1, he's a fair price. I don't hate it. There's some merit to going different ways up there, which we'll talk about probably in the round table maybe. But McIlroy, number 1. Number 2 I like is Cantlay, another guy who just failed people. Same thing. Don't think, his price actually did go up quite a bit. It went from 9 to 9,800. But again, smaller field, 64. I still think as far as tee to green goes, in my model for the last 3 months, he's got 23 rounds in there, and he's sitting second with every stat in the top 10 or better for all the things we talked about. Still like him a lot at 9,800. And then I don't know how popular this guy will get, but I know the controversy with him from the RNA and his driver with X. But Xander Schauffele, $9,300. Don't hate that either. Been good in WGC events. Seems like a fair price. Again, it's up there a little bit. I know that Rose and Stenson and those guys are right there, but I do like Xander as well. So those would be my 3 that I'm looking at in initial leans right out of the gate here.
Yeah, I like Xander. I think I have historically not been a big Xander fan, but I found I was rooting for him pretty hard over the weekend, and it caused me to kind of deep dive into him. And I think he's just under-respected and undervalued. And I think his price is fair where he is. I think he's priced correctly, but in general, the dude is just a baller. So I'm glad you mentioned him. My top 2 are Rory for the same reasons you mentioned. One of the best drivers of the golf ball on the freaking planet. Top 4 in every single one of my stat categories. Top 3 in approach. So I love Rory to bounce back this week. Patrick Cantlay is my second one. Just a solid ball striker, phenomenal iron player. I expect him to come out and play well here again. And then my last one is, again, same kind of mold, Henrik Stenson. Been playing really, really well the last month or so, hitting his irons phenomenal. And I think it's going to be interesting to see the ownership in this whole range here, because every single player you can put some sort of onus on why you should play them. But I love Rory, love Cantlay, love Stenson this week. I'll kick us off in the next range, which is going to be 7,600 to 8,900. Starting from the bottom up, I'm going to go Ches Reavie. Really like Ches this week. Drives the ball solid, keeps it in play, doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and his irons are really, really good. Next guy is going to be Gary Woodland. Again, when I think of Gary Woodland, I think of a guy that drives the ball really, really well. Good iron player. It all comes down to his flat stick and his short game. But he's going to give himself opportunities, and so I like that. And then Paul Casey. Paul Casey's a model of consistency, phenomenal iron player, hits a ton of greens. I expect him to play well. There's a lot of guys in this range that you could make just stupid good lineups with, but Casey, Woodland, Reavie are mine. What are yours?
Well, the rules state I can play up to 9K, so I'm really bending the rules here right to the limit.
Oh, my God.
I like all the guys at the top. Well, I do. I like Hideki.
It's 8,900, Tambo.
8,900. So I'm not going to the 9K. I'm not bending it that much, but I'm saying I am using up my max limit. I'm going right to the very top. It's 8,900 and below. I like Hideki at 8,900.
You're under 9K.
I'm good. I know. I'm just saying I'm keeping it right to the limit here. So I know people are going to like Bryson. I think there's merit to that. But for me, Hideki, again, talking about the stats that I brought up and just using them across the board, opportunities gained, tee to green monster, 150 to 175 killer. Birdies are better. He's actually first in the last 3 months with 24 rounds. We talked about this in the Slack last week or the week before about making sure you include a time frame, because otherwise someone's 24 rounds in all records could be from 7 months ago. I put it to 3 months here just because I want to see sort of a 90-day range. Hideki's number 1 in birdies are better, third in DK points. if people are going to go Bryson, I don't mind that. And I actually like, as my second guy, the one right underneath Bryson. It will, put the asterisk there for whatever putter the world tells us he has out on the greens this week. But I'm going back to Adam Scott. Same thing, stats perfect. WGC, I think it's a spot for 8,700 is a fair price. If we all liked him last week and everyone wants to jump off, that's a good spot for me at 8,700. And then the other guy, you mentioned Casey and Woodland, who I like, actually both those guys. But I wanted to bring up Webb Simpson. I like Webb.
Yeah.
I think he's still pretty underpriced considering at 8,200. We talked about scrambling earlier. He's known for his scrambling. The putter has got better for him. Good in big fields like this or strong fields as he won the Players. We know that.
Oh, yeah.
I think he could pop up for 8,200, and he ranks pretty well in my stats as well and is a fair price. I can see him fitting into a lot of different builds. And like you said, with Casey, Woodland, Reeve, all the guys you mentioned there, maybe he won't be that popular. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We're going to move down to 7,500 and under. I'll kick us off here and then throw it over to you. Starting from the bottom up, $6,500. Nate Lashley is a guy that I think is value, especially in a weak field, and you get all your rounds. So he's going to provide some breathing room to really go top heavy this week. I like Lashley. When I think about this golf course and having to keep it in play and having to have strong iron play to succeed, Keegan Bradley is a guy that I immediately think of. It scares me, obviously, but you got a no-cut event. You got 4 rounds for Keegan. It's fine. I think even if he has one bad round, as long as he makes it up and makes a ton of birdies, from a DK perspective, he will probably outpace his finishing position. So I like Keegan Bradley this week. And then the last guy, and I had and I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can play him, but I do have Jim Furyk right now as my last guy in this range. And I just don't know if he has – and again, winning score is 13 under here, so it's not like it's going to go super, super, super low, which I think helps Furyk. But when I think no-cut event, I do not think Furyk typically. I don't think that, this is a guy that's going to get me the birdies, the firepower that I want in a no-cut event. And so it kind of scares me, but keeps it in play and hits his irons really well. So he's going to give himself opportunities. And with the amount of double bogeys or worse here, I think that Furyk could be a solid option.
Yeah. So we don't talk before, but I got 2 out of the 3 the same. So just to reiterate a couple things I thought of. The first one's Furyk, to your point, who you just mentioned. Big thing for me there was not just, sort of what you mentioned just now, but even earlier when we talked. So we like Rory, we both do. When did Furyk show up with Rory? The Players. What's that? TPC Sawgrass. What has the second most water? TPC Sawgrass. What type of score did he put up? He still put up, I think, -14 and got beat by Rory at -15. Everything sort of lines up for me there with Furyk, and I don't mind him at 7,000. The other one who I did not think you would be on was Keegan Bradley that we match up on.
Yeah,
and you kind of hit up on the same point I was thinking, but it's, what's the classic full Keegan? Crush it the first round, be first round leader, miscut the second day. Well, guess what? There's no miscut. So even if, like you said, he does have that bad second day, he's got all weekend with no stress to make it up on a course that I think he can. So I do like Keegan there. That was the other one. I like your Lashley call. I don't hate that. He sort of popped a little bit in my model, but for me, it's Horschel, and I think he'll be popular, but is what it is. I even played him last week, and I probably shouldn't have just with his links record. But overall, he's good at Honda. He's been good at the Players. He's been good at these sort of Bermuda Green courses. Some will say he's more of a grinder than a scorer. But again, if it's -13 type stuff here, but even a -15, I can see him doing it. And we know he's got the capability. He putts better on Bermuda. Again, it's just more about a price thing at 7,600 or 7,500. He just fits the mold for me. And I think a lot of people will take, someone like Matthew Wolff there, who will probably bring up in the roundtable. Maybe we'll save it for that. But I personally still like Billy Horschel as the known commodity there, and see what he does this week at 7,500.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Wolff and Horschel. We'll talk about them here in a second. Before we get there, let's go to this 4th tier. So I'm going to ask you for 1 flop, so any price but won't return value. 1 fade that you like but fading because of ownership or just because of the players around him, something like that. And then one sleeper, so $6,900 or less.
Okay, I'm going to go backwards just because that's what I got him here. I'll start with my sleeper. And I think a popular guy who may or may not come up in roundtable is going to be Keith Mitchell. But a sort of a pivot I like there, and I talked a little bit about. I like your Lashley play. I think that's a good pivot. But I also like Max Homa.
Yeah.
For me, the thing with Homa is so 8 for 8 gaining strokes tee to green. So 8 out of his last 8 events, he's gaining strokes tee to green. 7 of his last 8, he's gaining on approach. He putts better on Bermuda. He won at Wells Fargo, which was Bermuda, and that was recent enough. So maybe this fixes him up here, coming back to it. And then, like I say, Bermuda Mitchell will be popular, but you got a guy like Homa who we know can score. So I'm okay with him as a sleeper at 6,400, which is also sort of the interesting price point of a lot of people are going to finish their lineup at a Hao Tong Lee, a Lashley, a Mitchell at 6,500, and won't go below that because sort of that 6,300 and down, besides maybe Connors, probably isn't going to get used at all. So I like having that odd price in my pool when I'm building for multi-entry. Secondly, so fade is Fleetwood. It could be Brooks. I'll go into him in my flop in a second. Spoiler alert. But the fade for Fleetwood is just the price. He did me wrong last week. 9,700. I said it was too much. It clearly wasn't. If I had to just backed off of one of the guys of Roy or DJ and fit him in, he sort of was one of those cuts that I was making because of price. Some folks pointed out on Twitter that I did point out at the start of the year in my Gups Corner calls and on the Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast, Fleetwood was my winner at the Open. I picked him, and he ended up coming in second. So
good job, buddy.
Well, it doesn't mean shit now, but the price at 9,700 threw me off. Cannot do it at 10-2. 5-figure Fleetwood just seems like too much, even in a no-scoring event, in a non-cut event. So, like I said, I can't lay too much there. I'd probably even play Rom over him. And then my flop, basically what I said here is I get the rule behind it in the podcast, so I understand it, but he's not a fade for me necessarily because what I'm going to do, like we talked about, most of my core is from can't lay and down. So, and I like McIlroy, like I mentioned, but he's not a core play. He's just one of my favorites above 9K. So if I use Koepka, it'll be for a couple reasons, but it's just he's the most expensive guy as always. But again, it's a different scenario. It's a non-cut event. It's a scoring event. It's solid as far as that's concerned. He's hitting it well, obviously, as we saw on the weekend. He just couldn't make putts. So, again, it's an interesting one. But if I was to do anything, what I do is if I had like a McIlroy Homa, I might swap that for like a Koepka and drop down to a weird guy. Or for example, something else where I can move the lineup around. But big thing on Koepka, I'm not sure if we're going to save it for roundtable, but he's 5 for 5 here, which is pretty crazy. He's 5 for 5 with a third and a second as well. He got second here in 2016. Also, there's still, people might forget, but in this WGC event, there's still 550 FedEx Cup points on the line. Koepka is actually leading Kuchar by 37 FedEx Cup points going into this event. It's bigger money. He probably wants that. His boy DJ, who he's crushed in majors, has a bunch of WGCs. So I think Brooks could try and get a WGC trophy on a shelf. And lastly, to the FedEx Cup points point is that remember that the staggered start. Right? If he can stay up on Kuchar and have that 2-stroke lead going in, imagine Koepka with a 2-stroke lead going into the final event of the year. That's going to be tough to overcome when you start him in a 30-man field with a 2-stroke lead. So he's still my flop because it's really tough to return value at 11.6, but he might show up in 2 or 3 lineups out of my 75 just because I'll put him with my favorite core plays, and that's it.
Yeah. So I'll start from the bottom down 2. I'll go with outside of Lashley, I'm going to go CT Pan. CT Pan's a guy that when I look at a course like this, he keeps it in play. He's a great iron player. He is historically a terrible putter. But at a golf course like this, getting to the green is the majority of the effort and where you're going to lose the most amount of strokes by missing greens, hitting in the water. CT Pan is a guy that I trust to keep it in play for 4 rounds. And so I do like CT Pan. I think at his price of 6,800, he is value. Flop and fade, I'm going to be fading Adam Scott. I don't care. I'm not even going to try look at him this week. Last week, he was part of my core, and I thought to myself, I saw him warming up last week with the short stick, and I was like, there's no way this guy realistically starts this major championship with the short stick. He did, and he was garbage. And I will not play Adam Scott this week unless I am 100% confident that he's going to use the long stick, which I'm not confident in right now. So I am going to be fading Adam Scott this week. My flop this week is going to be Justin Thomas. He played well. He's starting to get back. But when I look at Rory, DJ, Brooks, Rahm, Fleetwood, Cantlay, he's the one guy in that entire range that I would choose last. And so for his price, I will not be playing Justin Thomas this week. But those are my three: Thomas, Scott, and then I will play CT Pan at $6,800. I like it. Let's move on real quick to let's do rapid fire. This is perfect. Okay. So I'm going to give you just a few names. You just tell me who you like. You don't have to give me a reason. The first one between these three: Brooks, DJ, Rory.
Rory.
I'll go Rory too. Next one: Matsuyama or DeChambeau.
Talked about it. Matsuyama.
Okay. Casey or Usti.
I can't play Usti. Casey.
You can't play Usti?
No. This guy. I mean, it is what it is. But like I said, I like too many guys there. Simpson, Woodland, Casey. If it's Usti that gets it done and people want to be on it, go ahead. But I liked him more last week on the links course than I do here.
Yeah. No, I would agree as well. Rank these players.
No.
Stenson, Kuchar, Matsuyama, DeChambeau, and Scott.
Stenson, Kuchar, Matsuyama, DeChambeau, and Scott. So Matsuyama. Stenson, Kuchar, Matsuyama, DeChambeau, Scott. I like Scott. So Matsuyama.
You've said the right five guys twice now.
Oh, at least 3 times to make sure I don't screw this up again. Matsuyama, Scott, Kuchar, Bryson, Stenson. Boom! First try. Just had to say it 7 times out loud first.
JB, can you cut this clip and send that to Mayo just so he understands that Tambo's got it now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got it. Thank you.
So out of those 5, I would rank them Stenson, Matsuyama, DeChambeau, Kuchar, and then Scott like $6,200 is what it should be priced at this week.
No.
Guy's garbage.
Trash. All right.
Trash play. Give me a couple guys, maybe. I know you've mentioned Wolf and a couple others. Who do you have for just a couple other guys that we may not have mentioned that you want to touch on real quick?
We'll skip over Bryson because it's been mentioned a little bit here, but I want to talk to you about Rahm, first of all. Okay. So I got 3 guys I want to talk to you about. First one's Rahm. We can make it quick because I don't want to keep this pod going forever, but what's your take on Rahm this week? I like that you mentioned that about Thomas because I think Thomas is going to be extremely popular. I got a FOMO bet on him, which we'll get to in the next segment, but I don't know if I'm going to pay. He's the one that I'm talking about when I'm saying this is an initial lean, and if Thomas is going to be 20 to 25%, and I got Rahm right underneath him and Rory right above him, then I'm fine moving off him. But what's your take on Rahm? Because I know where you're at on Rory.
I like Rahm, but the amount of blow-up holes that are possible at this golf course concerns me with him because we all know that he can just explode at any time. But with that being said, he's got 4 rounds guaranteed, and there's not too many other guys in this field that can just get as hot as he can. I mean, you have the Brooks, the Rorys, the DJs, but for his price, he might have more upside than almost anybody in the field.
Yeah, and in my last, it's not as huge of a sample size, but he's been beating Thomas and Fleetwood in birdies are better and DK points. And my thing is, even with the blow-up round on Sunday, first of all, you can't really compare these courses. They're not even close.
Correct.
Second of all, even with the blow-up round, he still finished T11. And before that, he's got a first, second, and third in different types of conditions. So
he is a pure scorer.
I like him for GPPs, and I think he'll be less owned. I think people want to play Fleetwood after second place.
Absolutely.
And people love Thomas this week, so I don't mind Rahm. The other guy I want to talk to you about, we'll save Wolf. One guy is Lefty. Lefty's the lowest price I've ever seen him in any event, let alone a non-cut, at $7,300.
He should be that price.
But wait, he's 7 for 8 in this tournament with a 12th, 9th, 2nd, 3rd, and 11th. Change your mind?
I will, whatever odds you want, that he will not finish inside the top 20.
Jeez. And it's only a 64-man field. All right, I'll leave that at that.
I mean,
just to fit one more in. Let's move on. Let's move.
He is playing so bad, and he is openly admitting that he's just not right. Not with his swing, not in his head. Like, he is off of it right now.
What better way than a course you know and crush to snap you out of it, though, right?
And
non-cut event and
exactly
WGC.
4 guaranteed rounds for him. But I mean, I fully expect him to have like 7 water balls on Friday or something.
Let's just say he might make my pool. And then one more is Jason Day, 8,300. Yeah. He actually went down in price. He just screwed everybody. What's your take on Jason Day?
I actually really like Jason Day. He is very, very volatile off the tee, but he is a solid iron player, and his putter is phenomenal. And when it gets hot, it gets hot. He's got 4 rounds here, so it's not like he has to worry about keeping it in play to make the cut. He can freewheel it. And again, he's one of those guys that, I mean, he's $8,300 and he's one of the elite scorers in the world still. I know he's had his issues this past year, but from a pure upside talent perspective, he's in a whole nother level than Lowry, Finau, Simpson, Casey, Usti, Woodland.
Right.
So
I think people like Finau, which maybe you want to talk about him, but who do you got besides Wolf?
Wolf is a guy that I did want to mention real quick because of his upside. He's got 4 rounds. He's a ridiculous scorer. And I think we've just seen the start of what he can do from a capability standpoint. The only guy, and I'm glad you just brought him up, the only guy that I wanted to touch on real quick is Finau. Played really well last week after struggling. He was the perennial top 10 guy last year, been struggling this year, still having a decent year, but then struggling on and off. Started playing well last week, really got his iron play going. His short game was there. And so I think if this is another course that, and again, very, very different golf courses, like completely opposite. But if it's playing firm and fast and he doesn't have to just smoke driver off every tee, I think his iron play has been improving. And I think, again, for whatever it is, $8,400, a guy that almost always outscores his finishing position with DK points, he's a solid play.
Yeah, I mean, he had some, like you said, the different course thing concerns me because they bumped his price back up to 8,400, I believe, from 7,800. And he had some sneaky links, right? People were not really talking about that a lot, but at the Open, he was 9th, 27th, and 18th in his previous 3 Opens coming in, and then obviously finished 3rd. So that's a little bit different for me. I'm not sure with the water here. The price is actually fair, I think. It's going to be tough, but I think I would make that another pivot where I'd probably play Day over Finau. Now, I can fit them both in my pool in multi-entry, and like you said, I got to have some Finau just because that upside. But I still kind of like my Day take more than Finau there. Just to, $8,300 is for Day seems crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now that we've covered the DFS perspective, let's get into betting, and we'll make this quick. It's a very, very small field. So Tambo, I'm going to kick it over to you first. Give me 1 or 2 guys that you like that are 40-1 or shorter.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many bets you have. I mean, Kenny and I do a little segment. I literally have 2 bets as of right now. I think I'm going to add 1 more, so I'll just open it up if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. Perfect.
I said before, so I've got a bit of a FOMO bet on JT at 16-1, and it's because I started feeling like I think I'm going to fade him in DFS, which is what it is. Regardless how many lineups you have, there's just too many other guys up there. His price actually went up. If everyone's going to be off of him because of that price, then maybe I do keep him in the pool. But I wanted to have him at the bet because I think 16-1 is pretty solid. So a decent chunk on that. The other guy that I have as of right now, my only other bet is actually my boy from back in the day, Keith Mitchell. I missed him at the Honda. I talked about fading him a little bit here because I think he's going to be popular, but he is better on Bermuda. 175-1 with a top 5 each way that I can get in a 64-man field on Bermuda where he has upside. I thought that was fair. So 175-1, I'm taking that. That's the 2 bets I've locked in this morning.
Okay.
The one I'm considering is Matsuyama at 33-1. Probably lock that up before day's end. I wanted to see a little bit more and get a few more takes on him, but you don't sound super high on him. It sounds like you might like him, but it doesn't sound like you love him. So I have to dig in a little bit more and get some more takes.
Not
in
love, but I will still be looking at him for sure. For me, and we'll open it up. There's just a few that I was really considering. I'm not going to go too far into the short range here. I'm going to start at like 40. Patrick Reed at 40, I think, is a solid play. He's been playing really well right now. Has his iron play kind of dialed in. The next guy that I like is a guy we both are on this week, and that's Keegan Bradley at 125. I think that's really good value in this short field. And then the last guy that I really like this week, and you just mentioned him, is Keith Mitchell. 175 or whatever it is just an insane number. So I think we know that he has the game. We know that he likes playing on Bermuda. And so that number for him is awesome. So I like all of that. Let's get into the one and done. Right now, I am at 3.67 million. That's for my first. I have 3 entries. My first entry is 3.67 million. I had Rose last week for 97K. Gups at 7.25. You had Benny On last week for 56K. I'm not sure where you stand overall, but who did you have?
4.2 million. I had Molinari, and he had a nice Sunday for me, and then some of the weather helped him creep up a little bit, so it got me up to 4.2, which will be dictated on some of my strategy here.
Absolutely. So who are you on this week?
When I saw that, I didn't think I really was involved, but I forgot that, anything can happen down the stretch. So I need to sort of pick one that's off the board that I don't think many people will go with this week. But with that said, I think it's 1.8 million this week. It's the biggest pool left, 1.845 or something. I also didn't want to go I'm not going to say Max Homa and then just hope he gets there on a 1%er. I don't think many people will use Webb Simpson this week. And I talked about earlier how much I like him. I have, Xander I could use. I have Scott, but I still think some people will use these guys. I'm going to go Webb for one and done this week and just see what happens and hope I can even creep up a little bit with a win and then score my way in from there in the playoffs. And you never know what can happen with those big money prize pools down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. So for this, my first entry, which is what we're doing this segment off of, I'm actually going to use Koepka. I still have Koepka for some reason. But I'm going to be using Koepka. I do like him. He's one of those few guys in the field that if he plays well Thursday and gets motivated, he can blow the field out. Same with like a Rory that, like you mentioned, for my second entry, which is top 200 or like right on that bubble, 200th, I am going to be playing Fleetwood. I have Fleetwood. I do like Fleetwood this week. Not as much on DK compared to like an OAD or betting perspective, but I will be playing Fleetwood in my second. And then a quick shout out to our leader. Min Man has a $700,000 lead heading into this event. Last week he used Molinari as well. Had an amazing Sunday to help him out. The 2 guys behind him used Fleetwood and got a little $1 million payday. So good for them. But he has a $700,000 lead going into the FedEx this week. It's going to be interesting to see who he's got left, who he's going to use. Tambo, we've covered a lot of information in the last 59 minutes. You have any final thoughts for us this week?
I would say, one thing too, I think you forgot to mention, but what's Gup using? Xander?
Oh, Gup is using Xander. Yes, thank you.
He wanted us to mention that, so I just brought that up now. and for final thoughts, I think I gave a lot as far as strategy, lineup construction, pool construction, all that as far as a non-cut event. Definitely different than your normal week. I'm going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse with this because everyone hates me and slack for it, but just don't talk about it on Thursday. Like, it really doesn't matter on Thursday. Even this week in the higher entry stuff, it's really tough to be out of it on a Thursday in a non-cut event. We talked about it with Keegan. He can go up one day and down the other or vice versa. Make sure you're building for that scenario. Like, find the guys that you think can score or have really, that you've got conviction behind that you think can get it done here, because then you shouldn't have that issue. You might have a day where they only go 2 under or even, but then the next day they go 7 under. So you really want to look for those guys, leave some money on the table, Build away from the chalk, I would say, is my tip of the week. And I don't always just say that blindly, but it's a spot where I really do highly recommend it and have had success with it in the past as far as WGC events go.
Good stuff. I like it. As always, join us on Wednesday night in the chat room, 9 Eastern for the E9. It's going to be another good week. We're going to be doing that live via YouTube behind on the site. So check that out. I know we had Feinberg last week. It was awesome. Had a ton of DMs complimenting him and you, Tambo and Gup. So fantastic stuff. Last thing that I'll mention is I hope everybody enjoyed the British Open. It was a fantastic event, whether you won money, lost money. It was a really, really fun event. I hope they put Royal Portrush in the Rota, because it was a perfect venue, in my opinion. You had a guy that kind of ran away with it, but we talked about it a lot last week that we thought that single digits were going to win, especially with the way that the weather was, and it happened. So all I can say is now that we have 9 more months until the next major, get prepped for these smaller events, get prepped for the final push for the playoffs. It's going to be great. And then be on the lookout for a lot of new information coming out regarding the NFL season at Gup's Corner, the fall swing at Gup's Corner, and then JB's going to have a lot of information coming up about the contests that are coming up in the fall. So a lot of really cool things coming up for Gup's Corner. We appreciate all of the support. We appreciate all of the activity, engagement, and Slack. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for you guys. If you guys need anything, or if you guys have any questions or concerns or comments, let us know. We are all available. Most of what we talked about tonight, most of the segments that we had tonight were because of listener requests. And so if there's something that you want us to discuss that you think we're missing, hit us up. We're available. Outside of that, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Join us Wednesday for E9.
SmashFactor.